everybody. Can you all hear me? Yes. Brilliant. Thank you all for spending your morning here. I'm Arti, as you already know. Can I just have one quick round of applause for this stellar So we don't have a lot of time today, so I'm not going to go into everybody's accolades, but I really urge you to go on to the AWLS website, where everyone's, where they come from, etc., is all there. Please do, because it's all very stellar. What is important, though, is we're going to talk about where they come from and what they've done to further diversity and inclusion in the spaces that they work in. And I think it's really quite clear that we are all a sum of our experiences. And today, this is so clear with this panel that I have here today. I left traditional corporate life because I felt I didn't belong. It was suffocating, and apparently I was too emotional. So, there were too many examples around me in corporate Asia of women who had made compromises of time, of value, of identity, of freedom, just to be where they wanted to be, needed to be. They were always asked or told to ask for that seat at the table, even though they'd already done whatever it took to be there. And that irritated me. So 25 years ago, it felt like an uphill task to hold leaders accountable to do the right thing. We're here now, 25 years later, and I feel we've all but inched forward, other than some small actions, big actions, that are going forward to kind of change this landscape. The workplace in today's language is no more wall-to-wall carpeting. Nobody needs to be in a suit. And everybody's on Zoom. We've got a next generation of leaders who are demanding that things be more flexible. Flexible in a way that there are traditional and non-traditional choices. People are asking for pauses in their careers for a variety of things. Not just caregiving, but study, health, travel. It demands it. And yet, a leading Singapore daily a couple of weeks ago proclaimed, I have to read this, rising women power will not shield Singapore from fierce headwinds. And this was followed by a conciliatory tone that businesses can gain from higher levels of participation and productivity of women in the labor market. So, I feel there's still a begrudging acceptance, despite all these walls being torn down, of what women do and how women want to do these things on their track to leadership. So today's conversation is going to talk about how leaders, how we all, can navigate this inclusivity so that women leaders are not derailed. Simon, I'd like to start with you, if that's okay. You're a champion at work and in life of inclusion. And when we met, you said to me how curious it was that, I think somebody in the first panel talked about this, that Arvind said, how women hold up half the sky and we're still being treated like minority. Why do you think workspaces across the world still finding it difficult to foster an inclusive environment?
Thanks. I think I said, first of all, the first panel was amazing, and your real stories changed what I prepared for today. I had statistics, I had numbers, and I had the rest of it, and do you know what? I thought, I'm just going to be an authentic leader like everyone that I saw in the last panel. So one statistic that I will say is that there was a very famous group of psychologists in New York that did a session around LGBTQI inclusion. I am an openly gay man, and I have an amazing husband from the Philippines, and I tell that story in every single session because somebody in the audience is not able to say it, and I'm a white guy with privilege, and I am able to. So it happens regularly. Last week in the Philippines, had a very big multinational supplier into the site, and I talked about my story and my work on inclusion at the United Nations and the World Economic Forum. And he came to me afterwards, just as he left the building, and said in my ear, I have a husband and 2 children, and I don't say it at work, but thank you for saying it for me. So that's the first piece. So my story is not an easy one. Like, I was born in Yorkshire, in the north of England. My dad was a miner. I came from a pretty poor community. I knew I was gay from about 12, but I didn't tell anyone at work until I was 32. And it started because one of my team came up to me and had pain in their head, headaches, like really bad headaches. And we went to every doctor and we went to all this psychologists and stuff, and I helped him on this journey. And what it was that he identified as she, and she wanted to change her identity. And she went through a pretty tough journey of suicide and many other things that we helped her on her journey. At that point, in a country where it was still legal to be gay, Singapore, which today it isn't, repealed in 377A only 2 years ago. And literally this week, the King of Thailand signed off same-sex marriage, so you can see that South Asia is pushing the boundaries. I decided that, you know what, I have the place and the position and the ability to step up and say, I'm gay, and I'm proud of who I am, and I want other people to realize that you can also be. So I talked about women being 51% of the population and still treated like a minority. I am supposedly a minority, but still from a male perspective of privilege, also being white. So these 23 psychologists talked about homosexuality and people's perceptions globally. And in 23 markets, gay men are disliked more than gay women in 21. And only 2 markets in the world is the other way around. India and China, which is kind of interesting. And I think it comes back to that traditional mindset and education and family scope and et cetera, but it's quite interesting that 23 markets around the world of traditional and non-traditional markets, only 2, and both are in Asia, is the other way around.
Yeah, so that's culture. Mansi, I think that speaks perfectly to your experience, right? You've worked with corporations that's merging. Can you talk a little bit about that cultural integration and how it kind of moves alongside gender inclusivity without interrupting leadership track?
So thank you for having me here. I thoroughly enjoyed the morning session. Kudos to the panelists, and like Simon said, the sharing was so intimate and genuine that the rest of the panelists, at least I was wondering, oh my God, ours is such a theoretical topic, but I'm going to make it personal, like she's asked me to. So, yes, I head HR for Wipro Consumer Care, and up until 2007, Wipro Consumer Care was only present in India as a market. And we branched out of India as a market after 2007 via acquisitions. Today we are present in 18 countries with offices and workforce. But when we entered these markets, we only entered them with our understanding of diversity was only gender. Because in India, women at managerial roles are underrepresented. And that was the only aspect of diversity that we understood. But that was not really the challenge here, either in Southeast Asia or Europe or Africa. So Africa, for example, had a metric of broad-based black economic empowerment that we had to monitor. There was ageism in the UK that we had to keep track of. There were single mothers which represent a huge workforce in Philippines. So we were fairly lost at how do we didn't understand intersectionality at all back then. How we navigated that was first trying to find a commonality. And we said, what we understand is gender. So let's have a commonality of gender across all these markets, right? So while the country wants us by law to have a metric of BEE, that's how many blacks in your workforce, let us focus on how many black women do we have in our Africa entity. How many women above 50 are we hiring in Europe? What are we doing for the single mothers in Philippines? So we brought the commonality of gender into the nuanced sectionality that happens. I'll give one very short example. In Philippines, we thought our maternity policy was very robust and comprehensive, but the laws we have, where they have considerations for single mothers, they have additional leave for caregiving because single mothers need that additional support. So nothing stopped us from picking that and taking it to other markets and going above and beyond what was the minimum required.
Thank you. So, yeah, that's really interesting, right? So, I'm going to go to Anita. You've had quite that diverse career, right? You've done media, you still can see. I think particularly the thing that caught my attention very early on was your life, the documentary that you did, where you spent time in a nursing home. So using, I think, some of those principles of using that commonality, can you share how those experiences have shaped the way you practice advocacy? When I think you have the power or the control kind of to make your workspace more inclusive. So how do you do that?
Thank you for the question, and it's nice to be here, and it's great to be on the panel. I learn so much every single time. I think embarking on the documentary, which was in 2016, after about a 9-year space discovering experience of being a caregiver to my mom, whose birthday is actually tomorrow, and she's not with us anymore, so this is perfect. It really took me down a path where I discovered that this way of talking about diversity and equity and inclusion and intersectionality and everything, it really exposed what wasn't there. And that really came from a really deep well of ageism. So for me, after this 9 years of being in a very intimate learning experience with my mother, to then find myself for 2 weeks inside an elder care home, which I volunteered to be in, to do this documentary together with the Leanne Foundation, it really actually exposed so many of the things that I thought that my mother and I had somehow, we had transcended, but actually there were so many other people left who it hadn't transcended for them. So what I really learned, and that was the question, wasn't it? Thank you. Because I'm watching to see that you got time things. What I learned was a couple of things. Was that the way I saw life was not the way that everyone else saw life. It also forced me and exposed to me this deep well of ageism. It also exposed me to myself, for the way that I thought about the reason why other people put their elders into elder care. So it was a two-way kind of street, but I think the overarching, the biggest thing that came out of that for me was in my country here, which is one of the fastest aging countries in the world. This attitude towards ageism is actually what prevents the diversity, prevents the inclusion, and definitely prevents the equity as well.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a nice segue, Anurag, because with all of this, this appreciation of where we are and how we feel things and all of these different things that we're trying to include. Throughout your journey, you've been corporate, and now you're in entrepreneurship. What do you see as special about women leaders and how they make their career moves towards leadership?
So that's an interesting question. So I have been leader. I have handled teams predominantly men. I have handled teams which are half patriarchal society and half matriarchal society. I'm talking about Russia and Turkey. I have handled teams where I am probably one of the 3 men in the room out of 30 participants. So I've seen various diverse scenarios, I think. But in any given scenario, or even any, I see that there is no difference in terms of an aspiration. When somebody aspires to be a senior leader, there is an amount of work that needs to go behind it. There is an amount of thinking that needs to go behind it. It doesn't happen automatically. And I think I heard from those special women that were here today in the first panel. And what I would say is that they will probably corroborate what I say. So I think the first thing that I see is that I've seen that they are not afraid of pointing out or bringing up any biases that we as men kind of bring in, right? And I have been, to be honest, I have been a part of it as well. There's nothing, but that's the way we have been brought up. And it took a while for us to change. I remember a team meeting where I was a little bit more aggressive than I was supposed to be, and the women pointed out to me that you are too aggressive. You feel threatened. I had to go back and say, yeah, probably it's right, because I'm used to working with a lot of men, and I have to be aggressive, right, to get my point through. But I took the point, and I think since then, when I was working, I was made it an extra sure not to do it. But the point is that they pointed it out, and that's one of the things that we need to do, because a lot of men are not like that. It's just that they have been conditioned and there are biases. They don't understand that there are biases in the way they behave. So point it out. I think that's an important part. I think second thing is allyship. I think it's important that you have allies in the organization. You have to create them. And now if and I would say that have men allies, sorry. Because if I see this room across, I think there are 10 men in this room. Right?
Thank you for pointing that out.
Yes. And every man that I sent this invite and said, please join, they said, I'll ask my women leaders to join in your group. I said, why not guys? Oh yeah, I don't have time, I need to do this, I need to do that. So, as women, we need to create allies, especially in an organization. And there's a bit that I see that I need to go out for a drink in the evening, but I can't go because I have to go to a family. But that's not true. You can create allies during the work time. There's lunchtime, there's coffee break, there's work that you guys are doing during the day where you can help people and build up a network. So I think most of the people who are at the senior level and who have at the senior leadership, they have created that. I think that's something that we definitely need to do. And third thing that I see is that they need to constantly upgrade themselves. Like anybody else, I think for them it is much more important as a woman, for you all, that you have to constantly upgrade, especially if you are taking a break. I think once you come back from the break, you need to be standing up and saying, oh, I took a break for family reasons, but during this break I have also done this. That's the best thing that I can hear. And I have taken interviews and said, oh, we're taking care of it, we didn't do anything. But then in tech space, at least 3 years is a long time. So, you sometimes say that you could have done some short course. Maybe. I'm a father, I know that children can be a burden, especially for the young ones, but even if you have done a little bit, it gives me an indication that there is a focus in terms of growing and building up your career. That's what CEOs see. I think these are the 3 or 4 things that I think are very critical when it comes to, for the special women at least who want to aspire for senior leadership.
Thank you. Yeah, so I think it kind of goes back to my initial thing, right? That we are told to do these certain things. Maha, with your work with Mondelez, you boast some amazing stats, right? 60% MD roles being women, and factories in remote villages having over 70% in front lines. Can you, and nobody told them to do this either. So they went out and got it. And there was a space that was safe, that allowed them and encouraged them, not allowed, encouraged them to do it. Can you share some behind the scenes stories of how it got there and what it took to get there? Yes.
Do we have a tech expert? Yes. Well, actually, before I respond to your question, I'm going to take a liberty. So we had a panel which had someone, and by the way, thanks for your vulnerability and authenticity as well shared, right? We had someone who's a parent, someone who had an elder care, situation. We had someone battling cancer, someone going through divorce, someone going through multi-country moves and finding ways of inclusion. Someone who is very comfortable not sitting inside a cupboard but declaring identity. When we have such people in decision-making roles is where change happens, and that, my starting reflection is that's the business case for diversity.
You know, I mean, the minute we have decision makers representing the consumers we serve, we don't need any other reason, you know, as an organization or as a society to kind of say, hey, why diversity, you know, why inclusion? Because lived experiences build a case for change, and then we make sure we start doing something about it. So if I had one wish, panel after panel, you know, other than stories that touch our hearts, if we could all go back with one thing we will do, that would be my vision aspiration, you know, at the end of the day today.
You'll have a chance to share that.
So now to answer the question, right? Going all over, but now let me come to the question. Yeah, so I represent Mondelez today. Mondelez, I hope you guys have your Cadbury chocolates and Oreo biscuits and Tang and Dorita. That's uneaten cheese if you're all from Philippines. Or Halls, I was very disappointed seeing Mentos here. We need to put Halls here next. But that's the company I represent. And yes, I mean, we worked hard over the years without any gender representation target or other forms of diversity representation targets to make sure that we represent the consumers we serve inside the organization. And I'm going to pick on two stories that they already touched on. The first one, imagine India, you know, and imagine remote rural India, okay, rural India where typically it is assumed the man goes to earn, he's the hunter-gatherer, the woman is the nurturer who's going to sit at home and, you know, take care, build the family, take care of the family, etc. We said, hey, you know, I mean, we want to really break the boundaries of our own mind and say, why can't our factory have more women, you know? And why should it be only in enabling roles? Why wouldn't we have women in the shop floor? And what would it take? So simple things, right? Do we have machinery which allows a woman to operate machines even if she's going through her menstrual cycle, you know? Do we have equal number of restrooms? And I laugh every time I go to the airport, right? There are 3 lines for men and 1 line for women, you know, like. There is a journey to go. We said we're going to break that. We're going to have equal restrooms. We're going to kind of, you know, go and try and attract women. It didn't work. You know, and then we realized that the reason it did not work is families were still not very comfortable sending their girl child to a factory to work. So what did it take, Kariti? It took effort of many people in the organization to go and work with the community, work with the families, actually invite parents to our factory to see what it would be like to work in this factory for your daughter, you know, from a safety perspective, transportation perspective, ease of running the, you know, the forklift perspective. And today, I mean, it gives me goosebumps when I hear stories of how these girls have, how this has influenced how many girl children in that village in Sri City in South India. It's encouraged the families to send the girl child to school. It has encouraged a situation where these girls go back to school and are chief guests. You know, they've got the first table fan in their house, and they are chief guests in their school who are cutting ribbons. And you know, to create that, I mean, I really feel each of us has the opportunity to build change not just in the business but also in the community, and that's that story. Yeah, 60% of our women are MDs. We have 6 MDs in Southeast Asia, and 60% are women. That's another story. I don't want to keep going right now, but happy to touch on and take that up.
Yeah, somebody catch us. But that's fantastic, right? It's not about the taking of courses. It's not about, you know, trying to get permission to unpause. It is about an organization realizing that they need to take certain decisions and steps to change mindsets. And I think there isn't a playbook, right? So Mansi, I think you're familiar with this. When we talked, when we were talking about this panel, you talked about how you were writing policy as it happened. And a lot of it was based on your experience and some of the people that you were working with. Can you share some of the things that organizations and leaders should be looking out for? How do you come back if there's a misstep? How do you come back from that? So that there's trust, right? And that's not destroyed.
So, I've said this, yes, I've said this in many forums earlier, and I'm happy to share in this forum also. I was the second woman employee in my organization 21 years ago, which was then a $1 billion organization, but we I was the only second woman employee. And my first ask when I joined the organization was, can we have women restrooms on every floor of the building? Because just like Hidden Figures movies, every time I want to go pee, I had to go all the way out of the building to the other building and take a break. So that was my first ask. But in 21 years from there, today, we are 73% of diversity in this region and 56% globally. But more importantly, we are at 49% at manager level. So this has been extremely arduous, long, but very, very fulfilling journey. And like Arti mentioned, because I was the first and second employee there, everything was around, oh, what do you need? You just need a policy. Okay, what is it? This is the law. This is what you need. Juxtapose your needs on the law, and there we have the policy, right? So we made mistakes. We learned along the way, but we did make mistakes. And some of them, which I'm happy to share here, were first and foremost lesson that I learned is we did not ask, what is it like to be you? We did not ask that. Right? We went by the lived experience of the policymakers. So all the men in my organization, they went by what their wives went through or did not. And they asked me, is that okay? And I was some 9, 20, I said, okay, whatever works. Right? So when I was pregnant, for example, they said, this is the law in India, and just keep adding what you need. So the policy was evolving while my pregnancy was evolving. But I had 2 live births, right? So there was the policy did not cover for adoption, for example. It did not cover for miscarriage, because it was just around what I needed, and that was it. So that was one learning. What is it like to be you? Ask. And if you do not have enough representation in your organization, hire an agency to get it done. But get those voices in. Because policies are long-term, leaders will come and go. That is one. Second is, and that I think there we did well, start from where, everybody's starting line is different. So start from where you are, do what you can, work with what you have. So we did not get distracted by how fast the industry or the market was moving. People were talking about neurodiversity, LGBTQ, race. We were still stuck on gender, right? But we said, never mind, let's just get this part right. And today when we got that part right, we can probably move to the other section. So we deep dive. In gender also, we started maternity first, then moved to safety and other aspects of making the workplace safe for women. But we completely focused on what we had. And third was, apart from, Kathy spoke about belongingness. So I really feel that diversity is about having representation of each section on the table. Inclusion is you have your policies, which include all of them. But belonging is something very, very different. Belonging is really when people are doing the right things, when no HR is watching you, when no metric is being followed. And that sense of belongingness is something that can only be built from the top and can only be built by role modeling. So I think those are the things we went wrong, but corrected, and I think we did well. Thank you.
And it's quite a balancing act, right? I mean, you have to balance everybody's need to belong as well and feel they belong. I think this, Simon, there's something that you might want to talk on, like how have you seen LGBTQI issues balanced with other inclusion strategies perhaps within the spaces that you work and live in?
So you asked the ultimate difficult question.
Of course, but of course.
Look, I get the first thing, and I have the stats, and I'm trying not to read them, but I hope I get them right. So 63 countries in the world criminalize homosexual behavior, right? Same-sex intercourse, etc. Unfortunately. In 14 of those cases, it's the death penalty. Interestingly, of the 63, only 40 same-sex women is illegal. So it's actually worse for men than women. It's probably the only stat today where it's the opposite, and it's a horrible statistic to be forwarded, right? But you asked me a question about local laws, local religion, local race, culture, etc., etc. The easiest thing I can say is starts with respect. Like every single person should be allowed to be their true self at work, regardless of their sex, their religion, their background, their race, their culture, their ethnicity, and all the other bits in between. And the thing that's really interesting in Southeast Asia is the total intersectionality of all those things. Like, are you Singaporean Chinese? Are you Singaporean Malay? Like, where are you from? Like, there's so many different categories and pieces and jigsaw puzzles that get put together and everyone's segmented. But at the end of the day, I start with, we're all humans. We all want to be treated with respect. We all have emotions. We heard about that earlier. And then you have to start with that space, that in the workspace, this is our purpose, our values, and everybody gets treated with respect in the workplace. That's the hardest thing to achieve, but it's the only thing that's needed. And we talk about sticky floor here, and the last thing I'll say, and I say to my team here on the Women Leadership program in Kerry, 30% is about your image, 60% is about having access, and 10% is about your capability. So traditional mindset in Asia is about education, education, education. I mean, it's fundamentally important of raising people up and giving people access, but it's a baseline. And unless we teach people how to show up, until as the 10 male leaders in the room as allies or as managers, bringing people to meetings, give them a seat at the table, give them the opportunity to speak for you in meetings, giving people a chance to step up, giving them access, there will never be progress. So that piece around, regardless of your background, it's about access and it's about image.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think it echoes what Adele said, right? We are people. Why do we have to separate our home self to our work self to our play self? Why can we not be whole all the time? So talking about the message coming from the top and the message coming from an organization as a whole. Maha, what can you tell us a little bit about like how chief HR people officers, chief experience officers, how can you align people strategy to power growth within this DAI track?
Absolutely, and I think towards that, whoever came up with this panel title, right, I mean, we heard of glass species, but I quite love this notion of sticky floor, right? So, yeah, then we need a few mavericks everywhere, not just at the top, but across, who would challenge. I think that's really, fundamental, personally for me. Challenge the sticky floor, challenge the glass ceiling, check whether the ceiling is imaginary, etc., etc. What can we do, and all of us working professionals, right? I think, to my mind, and I'm going to build from this, I think the biggest thing we can do is listen. I think honestly alluded to that as well. How deeply really are we listening? And this notion of people need to belong and feel at home, that could be very different for one person versus other. It could be a preference for one community, it could be anti-religion for another community, and then being sensitive that this can coexist, we can have completely divergent views coexist beautifully to create color, otherwise the world would be so black and white. Yes, perhaps, I know it's a very philosophical answer, not what I thought I would say, but philosophically, and I think at our heart, if we could just deeply, authentically listen to what people are going through, to what really work, what are their dreams, once we are, as leaders, once we are plugged into people's dreams, we can create an enterprise, a culture, a policy that actually enables those dreams and allows multiple dreams to thrive together. That's the biggest thing any leaders, any policymakers can do. Secondly, I would say leaders at all levels, right? It is absolutely not okay to say, hey, I did not speak my mind, I did not speak my voice. Because if we don't, we are actually letting go of ourselves, in not doing that. So feeling comfortable, one, of course, leaders need to create a space where everyone's comfortable, but people feeling comfortable and even at the risk of being a little uncomfortable, putting their hand up and saying, I have a different view, you know. I think it's those mavericks that actually drive change, and we really need more and more and more of that. I think those are what I would say, beyond the very obvious ones of we need nudge people, encourage, create development plans, and make sure that we get representation. But I think these two are perhaps close to my heart.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've been talking quite a lot about the traditional corporate scene. I want to switch a little bit to non-traditional sectors, where in my naivety, when I left the corporate world, I thought it would be easier, it would be less rigid. I was wrong. I want to talk to you. Your daughter works in the film and media industry in India, where you mentioned you were talking about some of these biases that are still quite prevalent. How do you think can we overcome systemic biases, particularly when women are aspiring to transition into leadership positions in these non-traditional sectors?
To be honest, these days there are no more non-traditional roles. There are roles and there are multiple opportunities that anybody can get into. Things are changing. But when she, so let's take my example, my daughter, she was in 9th grade, and she told me she wants to be an actress in the film world. And I was shocked because for us, not with a family, but not with a background, where anybody in my nearest future or family was anybody close to any movie industry. So, but we didn't say no to her. We said, okay, you are 9th grade. I thought it's a passing fancy, but it wasn't. So by 10th grade, I said, think it over a little bit more, because I don't think you can. I don't know whether you can become an actress and how long it takes to do that. She still wanted to be in the movie industry. The only thing that she saw at that time was an actress. So we thought through about it. How do we do that? I didn't want to discourage her. So we sent her to New York Film Academy for a summer course, and tried to figure out what it means. So she spent a month there, and she came back and said, I want to be a producer. I said, thank you very much. And then she finished her school, and then we said, okay, you need to study for it, because we don't want you to go in a place where you're competing with people who you don't have an edge. Only edge you have is that probably you're beautiful. But that's not what it should be, right, to start with. So she studied film and television production in UK. So we sent it to her, because India didn't have anything similar there. And she studied, and then she came back to Mumbai, and today she produces, she's an assistant producer. She does movies, she now does ads. She's happy with what she's doing. There's a lot, but still she's happy. So I think the point here is that when you get into non-traditional roles or non-traditional industries, a few things that I think is important, and probably others can collaborate here, and may not be true, but what I have seen is that, first of all, you need to have credentials around what you do. It takes a while to build those, especially in a non-traditional industry, right? In a traditional industry, you get into college, you get into MBA, you do this and you grow. But in a non-traditional industry, you need to create those credentials. So for her, for example, she worked during her course of 3 years, she would go internships, she would do jobs during the breaks and everything, and she built up her CV over a period of time. That is the first thing. I think build those credentials. If you can study for it, nothing like it, because then you have an edge. Especially, she had an edge in Bombay, because in Mumbai, there are very few producers who actually have studied to become a producer. So when she went in, she had an edge over all other people who were coming in there. So that was an edge. Second was, you need a mentor. You need a mentor even in your corporate life, but in a non-traditional, it is much more important. And she had a mentor. We knew somebody, we finally got to know somebody who was a producer in the film industry, and a very respected old gentleman, and he took her under his wing, and he guided her across her studies and during the career that she wanted to build. So mentorship is important, and it becomes more important when it's a non-traditional industry. So,
thank you. Anita, perfect person to tell me whether or not does this ring true? And how have you, I mean, you've been in this industry for so many years, you're in a position now to lead and to include. How do you do it?
The first thing I'm going to do is kind of just repeat what this panel is about, which is exploring the role of intersectionality in diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how boards and CEOs can drive empowerment for women leaders. And I think we have to first break down very quickly, and I'll do it because I know Arati has me on a time limit. What is intersectionality? What is diversity, equity, and inclusion? And for the last several decades that these punchy words have been used in the corporate world, no one has really thought or talked about the fact that it is a way of thinking. It is a way of thinking. It is a way of thinking and therefore also actioning and doing. Intersectionality is not, neither is leadership. It is not a concept, it is an act of service. And intersectionality is about actually not just putting myself in another person's shoes, but actually understanding it and seeing how the way I think and a lot of other people think contributes to what that person doesn't get. So I have lived a very privileged life in the work that I do. Part of the reason I have lived that privileged life is because I'm not a very dark-skinned Indian. And it has always been very, very clear to me that that was something that I was always going to work for. I was always going to work for the fact that I was going to be as intersectional as I could possibly be in the way that I think, because I was receiving a lot of accolade and a lot of space and a lot of credibility because people didn't really actually accept me, wouldn't have accepted me if I had been darker skinned. So that was one thing. The second place where I learned a lot of things was in the care of my mother. And we talked about, authenticity. We talk about lived experiences. We talk about wisdom. Well, that's what leaders should be. Use your life experiences and ask and speak to other people about their life experiences, because that's how you lead. That's how you are of service to one another. That's how you actually play a role in perhaps thinking intersectionally, and of course then leading to great diversity, equity, and inclusion. And as for non-traditional roles, I have worked for myself for the last 20 plus years in the media industry in various roles. And to be very honest, I've never had one mentor. I have many mentors. I have many people that I learn from. And all of them, by the way, are absolutely ordinary people. I don't learn from the leaders. I don't learn from the important people. I learn from the people who are considered not very important, because they are living experiences, they are having lives, they are earning, and they are at so many different levels. That's the way in which then I can be a person who actually applies that in the work that I do. And last but not least, of course, the non-traditional roles of the world are where you actually get exposed to so much more. I mean, I spend a lot of time on panels and talking to people in corporate circumstances and situations, and I'm a professional MC as well. And I think we have to understand that 95% of the things that we do are not led by our brains, they are led by our hearts. And I think that for a vast majority of the time, we spend avoiding our feelings, avoiding our emotions, and avoiding the impact of our feelings and emotions and those of others. And that is how we actually become, by actually digging into, I'll get off my soapbox in 2 seconds, digging into our souls and into our hearts, because you cannot be a great leader, and you cannot be a great leader in a time of AI and so forth if you are going to think like a machine. And the last thing I want to say is that it's not on women to find male allies. It's on men to seek women out to be their allies.
That should be on a t-shirt. We've got a little time for questions. 5 minutes for questions. Do we have any questions out there for any of our panelists? Yep, Nitin. Yeah, there's one. Yeah, we can hear you.
It's okay. My question goes back to what Anurag had initially talked about in terms of when women go on maternity leave or just leave in general and stuff, that they should be upskilling themselves, getting back upskilled in certain things or skill sets. So I just wanted to get some thoughts from the panel as to what they think about it, because I definitely disagree with part of it. And in my own experience, sorry? Plus one. So in my own experience, I know my wife right now is currently taking a break, and we have had a conversation, and she said, it was too hectic for me, and I really wanted to just not do anything. And I'm totally supportive of that. I see that with my mother, I see that with my sister, and it's just a break is a break. Right? You don't need to be thinking about reskilling and stuff. So politely, I disagree with that, but I just wanted to also get some thoughts from the panel as well.
So we have, go ahead. With you, Nitin, okay? I think career break is an act of courage, okay? It's not easy, and it's not only for maternity. Career break could be for personal goal pursuit, it could be for caregiving, it could be for, you could be transitioning from one career to another. So in fact, just today morning I saw that LinkedIn, when you are writing your updating, it has 13 drop-down options for career breaks, right? So I think that in itself explains that it is normalized, it's okay, and to me, I personally, that is completely my personal views, I think it's an act of courage, because I have thought of taking a career break so many times, and I have never done it. I have just, and don't ask me why, because I don't know. Okay, maybe it's fear, maybe it is doing something you've never done before, maybe it's the fear of not being financially independent, whatever, I don't know. I haven't even gone deeper to understand why. So, but I can therefore tell you, it is courageous and you learn a lot, irrespective of, consciously upskill, if that's what you meant. If you don't do that also, career break for whatever reason, you come back a better person. You definitely come back a better person.
I just want to add that I think attitudes, policies, and the ways that some companies are run, and also in general what we think of as a career break, is all in the negative. Everything is in the negative. I just want to just share a little bit about my own experience being a caregiver. Caregiving is seen as generally a 10-year cycle. It's a 10-year cycle, and it's generally a woman's role, at least in Singapore. And we've seen enough evidence to know that it's the woman who generally takes up the slack on the cycle of caregiving. And I think that what happens with a lot of the way in which we think about a person taking a break is that something that you took. For me, for 10 years, I was kind of like on a career break. And I had no idea that it was going to be a 10-year break. Because it's not a break, really. It's actually kind of a balancing act. It was sometimes a break and sometimes not a break. And when I came back into my industry full-time, there was still plenty of work and plenty of jobs. Now you can say that, yeah, well, perhaps it's a bit different when you're a freelancer, when you're drawing your jobs from many, many different sources. But what I realized was, first of all, nobody really realized that I had been on a break. I was in and out. Nobody cared, secondly. And thirdly, I think if I hadn't had that time in those 10 years with my mom, I would have lost out on the most important time of my life and the work that I needed to do. Was I working at the time? Absolutely. Was I going crazy? Yes, very much. Was I deeply sort of on the verge of some kind of a depression? Yes. But it gave me the time and the space in which to do it. The thing I guess I'm trying to round it down to is that quite often career breaks and things like that are seen as these beautiful, amazing, wonderful things. But I advocate for giving people breaks to actually go off and take time to caregive as well. And it just doesn't have to be just because you had a baby. Caregiving is like taking care of a much older baby, actually. And I think I would like for the drop-downs on LinkedIn to include things like that. I don't know if I'm actually answering the question for you, but I think I'm just speaking from my own experience. Sometimes a career break is something that you take and it's a beautiful thing, and sometimes it's a thing that you absolutely have to take in order for somebody else's life to actually improve.
Thank you. I can't resist a good controversy.
Go on.
So I'm going to jump in. Why are we you talk about women on breaks, we really spotlighted men who wanted to take parenting leave, and we went away from maternity policy to parenting leave. I have my marketing lead in Thailand, who with his partner has finally managed to have a baby and has taken a break. We are now super proud of them for having done that. So why are we even, there's so much assumption, right? And why are we talking about situations that make people go on a break? Actually, career breaks could be a wonderful point of rejuvenation and self-discovery, So how might we normalize? I think those are the posers in my mind as I hear. But I'm going to stand up in support and be an ally to my friend Anurag for a moment. You're welcome. I would say that, look, people take breaks for different reasons. Sometimes you want to break, you want to think, you want to reset your career. That's one type of break. The other type is where you want to invest in taking care of elders or youngsters, yeah. But if there is a point where you want to come back, okay, and that's the point to be practical about, If there is a point where you want to get back to the same sector or get into a different sector, making sure, and sometimes industries move at a certain pace, and I think if I recall what Anurag was really saying, tech, okay? By the time you've gone and come back, tech has moved, networks operates in a different way. So making sure you're not far away and you're still skilled, male or female, to be eligible to compete for that role is important in a practical economic sense of the term, And that's true whether you take a break or not. I could be sitting in my job, very competent, not scaling myself up, and in that sense preparing myself for my pink slip, right? So I would say this is no different, but I would take it in the spirit of, as you think about comebacks, make sure that you're skilling up in prep, not just mentally, which hopefully the break gives you, sometimes it doesn't, but also in terms of hard skills. And in that, a woman stood in the allyship of a man.
I'm glad you guys are listening, first of all. So yeah, I think that was the idea. I think the idea is not that we should not take a break. I think it was not, definitely not. My wife took a break from software. When she came back after 6 years, the software had gone, I don't know where. So she went into teaching. She studied for it. She spent 1 year doing a teacher's course. And she went back into primary school, and she loves it. She does it still today. So I think the point was not whether you should take a break or not. You should. You go on a holiday for 1 week. When you come back and you don't look at your emails for 1 week, it's a deluge of emails that you have. This is 1 week, right? And if you don't respond to them and you go, you're overburdened. Same goes with anybody who's taking a break and coming back. You have to be prepared for spending that extra time to do that. If you're changing your jobs, fair enough. You may have got a job and say, okay, next 6 months, 1 year, I'm not going to do this, I'll resign. When you come back, when you go for an interview, the CEO's or the person who's taking or expects you that yes, she's taken a break for the right reason, but they also want to understand that she had at least done a little bit to be there to get to the level when she comes, because it's going to be hard and painful, right? When she comes back, and has she done something to at least do a little bit about it? Doesn't have to be too much, but just an indication is good enough.
Thank you all for putting in thought. Simon, did you want to say something about this? I've got daggers at me.
I'm sorry, I feel like the only person that hasn't said something, but I'm boiling.
It's all Nitin's fault.
So, I guess the first thing, like when I go on holiday and I come back and I have emails, they're deleted. Like, if it's important, the person will re-email you. Like, maybe I'm the wrong generation, but I'm just telling you like it is. Like, to me, right, we talk about career breaks. Like, I have a member of my team who's going through a pregnancy at the moment. Before she's even left, she's had the worst first trimester ever. She's been sick every day, she can't work at a full pace. It's okay, she works half days. Like, the reality is, that we talked about earlier, everyone's individual. Like, to me, career break, the most bravest thing you can do. Personally, if you've done one, I admire you. I can't do it, I wish I could, because I'd be bored senseless after the first day. Pregnancy is not a career break.
Yes! Thank you.
whether you're male or female, we're all here because of women. So like ultimately, you guys like respect. So to me, pregnancy, career break, two completely different things. And I have to say that because I felt like we went down the career break, and the interview point I think was actually around if you're pregnant and you have a baby, you don't need to spend time re-educating yourself to come back into the workforce. Like, you should just take a break because it's hard. And I will never feel what you feel. I'm a man, right? But I've seen other people go through it. It is the hardest thing that anyone goes through. Your entire body changes, your life changes, everything changes. So career breaks, pregnancy, two completely different things. And we have younger people entering the workforce. They don't think the same as those that are here now. So taking a holiday means take a holiday. And the last thing I'll say, when I started at Kerry, something I've done my entire life, when I go on holiday, I leave my work phone in my house. It is not with me on holiday. It is my work phone. And it's something that I tell my team to do all the time. If you have two phones, your work phone stays in your house, not in your bag on your holiday. And I had one guy who worked for me who went on holiday and lost his work phone. And I made him pay for it, because it shouldn't have been on holiday. So sorry, I had to chime in, I apologize.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but that's all we have time for today. Obviously now comes the hard work, right? Again, I mean, we've got very vocal audience here where we're not going to stand for the lip service, we're not going to stand for the no unpause, we're not going to stand for a lot of the traditional ideas around traditional choices and non-traditional choices. So just to kind of round this up, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask my panel from Simon, what's the one thing you would suggest leaders can do to lend support towards this new generation of leaders and mopping up the stickiness?
One, give access and lose your ego. Like, you may be a leader, but there's a woman who needs an opportunity. Let her do the speaking for once and listen.
Thank you.
I'd probably say two words: listen deeply, role model the change.
Thank you.
I would say don't give this as an agenda to your leaders, as an additional hat for your leaders to wear. Give it to hire someone who's going to take care of this agenda for you from design to implementation. Don't make it an additional hat for the current leader of yours.
I think for me it would be that the culture change is needed, and it starts from the top. As a top, you need to give those daily messages and things that you need to tell our people, because they look at you. Culture doesn't start from bottom up. So as a leader, as a board member, the importance is that starts top down, and that's where I think we can do something.
I would say leaders need to educate themselves very deeply on what intersectionality really means.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, Anita, and Simon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much to all our wonderful speakers. Can I just invite you to the front for a group photo, please? Let's have another round of applause for them. Camera's right in the back. You've got the lovely Kyo having us today. Beautiful. Thank you so much.